solution at feelaway.com.
This is Weather Center Live, and this a dangerous day. Tornado outbreak expected today. For the first time in 2 years, the National Weather Service has pegged a high-risk area for tornadoes. And here at the Weather Channel, a Torcon of 9. It's almost a guarantee there will be tornadoes today within a 50-mile radius of any particular location, including several areas in Oklahoma.
And tornadoes are just one of the dangers. Very large hail, baseball to softball size, possible. And so is the kind of rain that could trigger life-threatening flooding deep into the overnight hours. We have crews in the field to keep you ahead of this extremely dangerous situation. It's all right here and now on Weather Center Live. We're here for you all day and all night tonight as this dangerous weather threat unfolds.
And I'm meteorologist Chris Warren. Parts of Texas and Oklahoma at the greatest risk. Tornadoes, long track tornadoes, possibly dangerous, big tornadoes, all the threats today. You see it 9 out of 10. This should bring, a scary kind of a pit to your stomach, into the pit to your stomach when you see something like this. Because this is less about, if we're going to see tornadoes. It's more about when they're going to happen and exactly where they're going to happen is really the big questions today.
And it's go time right now. We're going to start seeing the atmosphere really firing these storms up. This is the largest risk we've seen so far this year. So let's bring it over to our storm specialist, Dr. Greg Postel, for the storms flaring right now. What's catching your eye, Dr. Postel? Is the atmosphere, cleared out? Is there anything grabbing your attention right now?
The amount of wind shear, the magnitude of the wind difference between what's happening at the ground and what's happening, say, a few thousand feet above the ground is remarkable. It's on the very high end of the scale, among the highest I've ever seen, actually. And that has also prompted the Storm Prediction Center to have a keen awareness to the situation today. We've got a high risk of severe weather, including tornadoes, some of which could be significant, violent, long-track tornadoes. That is the area shaded in white. This is where the highest chance, and in fact is indeed a high chance for tornadic supercells across that region. Probably within the next few hours, I think, is when it's all going to be getting going. And we may even be watching some of the signs unfold as we speak. Going through the list of ingredients, I'll just get through them really quickly because later on today we might not have a chance to go through all of them, but they're really important. High-end instability. In other words, there's so much buoyancy available for very strong updrafts, super strong thunderstorms with all kinds of hazards, damaging winds and large hail, and of course a lot of strong wind aloft, especially out in that zone right now. I was talking about the wind shear. Well, the wind difference between, say, 15,000 feet in the ground is 90 knots. That's over 100 miles per hour. That's a rare quantity to be measuring at that strength across that region. So we are seeing the atmosphere build itself up in a way that is going to support tornadoes and some big-time tornadoes, I think, later on. Right now, the environment that is actually most favorable for tornadoes, I kind of highlighted out here. And the good news is, at least in the next half hour or so, there are not any showers or thunderstorms in that region. All of those are up in here in southern Kansas and northern Oklahoma. These are elevated storms. Those are not likely to produce tornadoes. They can be hailers, they can carry a lot of heavy rain, a lot of cloud to ground lightning, but as long as they're north of that warm front, guys, I think the tornado risk that way is not so high. It's going to be down in that zone right now, and we'll be watching a lot of, in the next couple of hours, the visible satellite pictures for evidence of cumulus development and thunderstorm development, because you can see that very easily on those satellite pictures. We do have that one severe thunderstorm warning just to the west of Amarillo, Texas. This does include Deaf Smith and Oldham counties. One of the things that I looked at is that this storm, while it's got the possibility of carrying with it some pretty big hail and damaging winds, it's not really imminently a threat to produce a tornado. But look at the length of some of these radar echoes. That tells you how fast that wind aloft is. It is just stretching things out from southwest to northeast. And that strong wind aloft is going to be very crucial to the development of extremely fast rotation in some of these thunderstorms capable of those tornadic types of events. So we got to watch this very carefully. And looking at the visible satellite pictures, guys, I'm looking out in here along the dry line. because it's that intersection between the very moist air to the east and the dry to the west. There may be some development taking place in the next hour or two along and near the dry line. And then the storms are going to get very quickly carried off that dry line and moving into that environment that is very, very supportive of tornadoes. Now, all these yellow sort of shaded regions are the regions highlighted by the Storm Prediction Center, guys, for the likelihood of watches. Severe thunderstorm watch up here, tornado watch here, particularly dangerous tornado watch there. We have it all, and the ingredients are coming together. We're even seeing right now, this is the tornado parameter, sort of a measurement of how capable the atmosphere is of producing a tornado. It is on the very high end of the scale in this region. And the good news is, in the near term, in the next hour or so, we're not seeing any thunderstorms in that zone. That's a good thing. You don't want any thunderstorms building up there, but unfortunately, I think later on today, we will. And I want to leave on this graphic right here. This is a forecast now from one of those models that tries to explicitly determine where the storms are going to be. It's very rare to see discrete supercells scattered like this all over the place, each of which having the possibility of carrying with it and producing significant tornadoes because of the environment that they're in. This is 4 o'clock this afternoon. Now, I'm not saying they're all going to be right in that spot, but the model's telling you something, and it's telling us all that a very dangerous event is unfolding and will likely be in just a matter of hours. That will include some very populated areas, of course, in Panhandle of Texas, southwestern Oklahoma, and also moving through parts of central Oklahoma, including Oklahoma City and Norman, of course, areas nearby. Chris, back to you guys.
All right, Dr. Postel, thank you so much. And we want to take a live look right now here at Woodward, Oklahoma, where it has been cloudy and it has been wet. And we're going to continue to track where these storms develop. And I just want to emphasize how important it is that here at the Weather Channel we do have experts like Dr. Greg Postel, because anybody can tell you the forecast, give you an idea of what your app says. But we're here to try to keep you ahead of the storms with expert analysis you will only find here at the Weather Channel. Also, we have team coverage in the field to give you an idea of exactly what's happening as it happens.
Yeah, so one of those team members is our own meteorologist, Paul Goodlow. He's live in Wichita Falls, Texas. Paul, take us through what you've seen so far today. It's been pretty quiet there right now. Are people serious about this threat?
Oh, for sure. In fact, Chris, I'm going to take you over the last 12 hours or so. We drove here yesterday from Dallas. We noticed a pretty nice afternoon. Low humidity dew points in the low to mid 50s. Very comfortable this morning. Dew points now moved up to the 60s. Now we're in the low 70s. So dew point to measure the humidity. So the atmosphere is priming itself. Our winds getting far more gusty coming in from the south and from the southeast. In fact, you see downtown behind me, you see some of the trees blowing as well. So we're trying to prime the atmosphere. In fact, Austin Anderson can kind of pan up and kind of show you we're seeing bits of blue sky out here, which is not what you want to see. Yes, you want a nice day, some blue sky, but this is a severe weather day. That sunshine gets down here, starts to heat the ground, and it's like lighting a match. The sun heats the ground heats the air starts to rise. If the surrounding air is unstable, that air keeps rising, and we get showers and thunderstorms feeding into the shear zone aloft, which can start things spinning as well. So we feel the energy in the atmosphere already, and while this part of the world is not unusual, not a stranger to severe weather, it's a big concern because the timing. Dr. Postel showed you the line of these storms coming through. The models are forecasting, between, say, midnight, maybe 6 a.m. So we're talking sleeping time. And in this part of the world, we don't have a lot of basements out here. Every now and then you might see a few cellars, but overall you don't have the basements to get into. The best place to be is either below ground or perhaps in a storm shelter. And earlier we talked to a business owner who sells storm shelters, and he talked about why these things are becoming quite popular nowadays.
They're a whole lot more accessible to the handicap. There's no stairs, you just wheel in and you're there.
And it's a simple install, no digging a hole in the ground?
No digging a hole. The concrete has to be a certain thickness, but Matt Flippin knows the specs on that. So
walk us through the process. Someone says, hey, I want a storm shelter. From the time they come in, see it, from the time it's in their house, how long is that?
If they don't have to do the concrete pad and they put it in the garage or somewhere like that where there's enough concrete, then that day. If it takes the concrete pad and different things, of course you have to take care of that, and probably 2 or 3 days tops.
And, you know, we spend, what, more than $1,000 now on a new cell phone, those storm shelters, $4,000 or $5,000. But truly, can you put a price tag on family members, on your spouse, on your children, on your grandchildren? So, yes, they are pricey, but so is a funeral. You know, I hate to be so morbid, but, you know, if you're in a storm-prone area, you don't have a safe shelter to be in, this could be a life-saving investment and a price tag that you don't think twice about if you have to go in there and you need it. So, of course, we always, guys, hope for and pray for the best, but you got to prepare for the worst as well. Guys?
And Paul, will you mention again, talk a little bit about what your plan is today? Because I know you want to stay safe, you want to keep your crew safe as well. Can you give us an idea of what you've been thinking about today?
I've been thinking about that timeline. I got to tell you, you know, I'm a professional and I'm concerned. You know, granted, everyone has a chance of seeing heavy rain, even some lightning nearby, but not everyone has that tornado threat. But you want to minimize your risks. So we'll definitely keep an eye on this all night long. Back at our hotel, we know there's places we can go in the interior of that first floor that we can go to. There's no storm shelter per se, but there are safer rooms in there. So that's something that everyone has to know. If you're traveling and you know you're in an area that has a risk of severe weather and tornadoes, ask the front desk, ask the hotel manager, and is there a safe place? Is there a designated storm shelter? And in kind of tornado-prone areas, there probably is. They have a plan of action already, so just have that in mind and make sure you have ways to get a hold. We have a package going on throughout today that will give you warnings on your phone for free. Anywhere here in the U.S. you get cell service, you can get a warning of severe weather headed your way. So you can get warnings of severe weather coming your way. Just make sure that you have a plan of action to stay safe.
Paul, thank you so much. And part of that plan, Chris, and I hate to say it this way, but you have to think about the walls around you and the structure, and you have to mentally think about your house coming apart, unfortunately.
Oh, yeah.
Which walls are most vulnerable? Where's the safest place to be in your house? All very serious and real things to think about.
And also, if there's a side of your house that has a lot of large trees, even damaging wind threat can knock those down. So maybe be away from that side of the house, too. Something to be, you know, most interior room.
We're going to be talking a lot about tornadoes because that's an imminent threat once they get going. But also an ongoing over hours and hours is going to be this, Chris. It's going to be that heavy rain. It's going to be eventually seeing some flooding out of this. It is going to be a nasty situation when it comes to the heavy rain and the possibility for flash flooding, which we know is life-threatening. Takes so many lives here when we talk about severe weather. And of course, we're going to be tracking that for you here on the Weather Channel all night long and into the morning hours live right here on the Weather Channel. Again, I want to go back to Oklahoma City, and Oklahoma City has a 9 out of 10. This scale only goes up to a 10. So a 90% chance that if you're in Oklahoma, a 90% chance that within a 50-mile radius, a tornado is going to come through. And not only is there a chance for tornadoes today, we're looking at the possibility of long-track tornadoes. So think about what a long-track tornado is. It's a tornado that is on the ground, is in progress for a long time, which means there's more chances to hit stuff, unfortunately. So widespread damage with the wind, and then large hail also a very serious concern. Right now things are quiet in Oklahoma City. It's to the north here into Kansas where some of the heaviest rain and lightning is right now, some of the intense storms. And what we're going to see here through the rest of the afternoon, eventually some of these individual storms outside of that main rain area, potentially going to be some of the stronger storms. And going into this evening, here we go again. So it's not just a one chance of getting some strong storms, possibly multiple chances of storms coming through. And notice many of these areas, heavy rain's going to be happening over and over again. And then once potentially some tornadoes come through, then it's possible some damaging winds come through in the morning with more heavy rain. So Oklahoma City, one of the big areas to watch. Also Lubbock, better than a 50% chance. It's a 60% chance there in Lubbock that there's going to be tornadoes within a 50-mile radius. And again, also some strong and long-track tornadoes, Chris, a possibility.
Well, and a lot of officials have already taken precautions and has canceled classes in schools. They don't want teachers and students out on the roads during the time the storms come in. So Oklahoma City is under a Torcon 9 today. This morning, our Jim Katori caught up with the city's director of emergency management, who said the city is ready to respond, and he warned residents that the weather can change at any moment.
I always tell people to make sure you have a plan, make sure you stay weather aware. Today is going to be one of those days where you really have to pay attention to what the weather's doing and the changing conditions, but have a plan, know what you're going to do when the tornado warnings are issued, and then when those warnings are issued, take shelter and then seek more information.
And Oklahoma City is also facing a flood threat today. The director says crews are ready to respond to that as well. Well, communities are already responding to this dangerous weather threat. Here's what we know right now. Both the University of Oklahoma and Oklahoma State are closed today. So are public schools in Oklahoma City and more. Tinker Air Force Base is closed as well ahead of what's expected to be a dangerous tornado outbreak. And Chris, what are we seeing right now? No tornado warnings. We do have a couple severe thunderstorm warnings popping up here across North Texas and also into Oklahoma.
Yeah, and we're starting off right now with some of the warnings, and it's a couple of warnings here. Severe thunderstorm warning in yellow and a flash flood warning in green. This is in Texas, and still we're really early in the game, essentially, with some of the heaviest rain right now. And eventually, once things get going, they're really going to get going, unfortunately, in parts of North Texas and across parts of Oklahoma. And one of the big tells here, look at the flow of the atmosphere. You can see clouds going in different directions. That's different heights. The atmosphere is ready to spin. It's not a matter of if, it's when and where the first tornadoes happen. In Oklahoma City, one of the big areas we'll be watching.
Look at the water.
Trusted.
I want to get right to it.
Reliable.
This is just beginning.
Accurate. You're watching America's #1 weather network, The Weather Channel.
A flash flood watch is in effect. Currently in our area, 56 degrees under partly cloudy skies. Today, rain developing during the afternoon. High 58. Rainfall around a ½ inch. Tonight, windy with thunderstorms. Low 53. Tuesday, thunderstorms likely. A few storms may be severe. High 73. Here's our 7-day outlook.
Welcome back into the Weather Channel. We're getting a new video here of what happened in Wichita, Kansas earlier. Look at the storms that we had, a line that came through, a lot of lightning as the storms just light up the sky here. Notice the winds too. You see a lightning strike? This is the kind of progression of what we're going to be dealing with. And we've got a lot of rain in Kansas right now. And flash flooding will be another huge life-threatening factor. Thanks for joining us here. We've got continuing coverage all day and all night on what's appearing to be a very dangerous day ahead. We're talking torque-ons of a 9 in much of Oklahoma, especially western Oklahoma from OKC into the Texas Panhandle. Let's show you what we have going on right now. Notice aloft, we have that whipping southwesterly flow moving in off the parts of Mexico out over West Texas and into the plains. Look at all the rain here that we have across parts of Kansas and into the southern plains, and the extreme rainfall that we're dealing with north of Oklahoma City. Right now, OKC, we're quiet for the moment. We do have some hefty thunderstorms working through northern Oklahoma. In fact, this storm right here just pushed through Woodward, Oklahoma. We can show you a live shot of what it looks like there just below me. You can see what's going on. In fact, the rain's coming down so hard and heavy, things have ponded in the middle of that intersection. See how the cars are going through, and you're seeing the wake from the flooding rains there on the pavement. So that's the kind of rainfall rates we're talking about. Now, none of these storms are severe. However, into Kansas, look at just the bulge of all of that extreme heavy rainfall right around central Kansas along a good 100-mile stretch of I-70. Flash flooding is going to be another huge concern, and we don't want to underestimate that as well. Notice skies have cleared, but look at all the different flows in the upper levels of the atmosphere. We have winds coming out of the southwest. Then we have southerly winds at the lower levels, so we do have that turning with height And that's what's going to set the stage here for quite extreme rest of your afternoon into tonight. Take a look at the couple severe thunderstorm warnings that we have. This one north of Vega now has a possibility of potentially producing a tornado quick to fire up. But right now we're going to head over to Chris Warren. And Chris, what are you most concerned about, especially with the timing of all of this coming into the southern plains?
Well, just the fact that we are expecting it to happen.
Yeah.
You know,
it's guaranteed.
It's going to, between now and the next 3 or 4 hours, something's going to be going on, and it's going to be just the beginning, unfortunately. And what I'm concerned about are these areas right here, parts of Texas and Oklahoma. This is an extreme situation where it is pretty much a done deal. There will be tornadoes. So have a way to get your alerts. Of course, not everyone is going to see a tornado. That is the good news. The bad news, of course, we are expecting a tornado outbreak here. And these areas here, parts of the Panhandle and parts of West Texas into central and western Oklahoma, it's looking very likely here. Now, you know, it's one thing, even if just a dark red, but you've got the very likely and extreme on the map. So also the fact that there are multiple threats with this is something that you need to have in the forefront of your mind as well. Tornado is certainly a possibility, but even after the tornado threat wanes, flash flooding is going to be a concern. So when the Storm Prediction Center issues a high risk, it's when we're expecting a severe weather outbreak. In this case, tornadoes associated with that. And it's going to be a high confidence also of either long track tornadoes or derechos. And long track tornadoes is what the big concern is today. The last time the Storm Prediction Center issued a high risk was in 2017. So it doesn't happen all that often. So more than 2 years ago. And right now, this is what's going on in the atmosphere. The heavy rain happening right now in northern Oklahoma and Kansas, but these areas right here further destabilizing the atmosphere as the sun getting through and in between those clouds. Let's see what happens here throughout the day. Some of these individual storms, this is 4 o'clock in the afternoon, likely to have tornadoes associated with them, and then continuing even into the evening hours and overnight. Here's 9, 10, 11 o'clock still going in parts of Texas and Oklahoma. And then, Chris, the potential there for some damaging winds, also large hail, a lot going on. It's going to be a busy one. And at the Weather Channel, we're going to be here live overnight, the night into the morning.
And then tomorrow, we're going to pick right back off where we left off and see that severe weather potential shift off into the Midwest. We're talking about places here like St. Louis. Right now we are showing sunny skies. Again, we're warming things up. We're getting the atmosphere primed for what could be a busy day here in St. Louis come tomorrow afternoon. So let's take a look at the timing. And while torcons aren't going to be nearly as high as what we're seeing tonight, they're still there. And in fact, we've got a good likelihood we are going to see severe weather across much of the Show Me State and to parts of the Ozarks and northern Arkansas. We've got torcons of a 4. These may even get raised a little bit higher as we go over the next 24 hours. So something to just be aware of, have your plan in place. We know Joplin, no stranger to tornadoes. Areas here in extreme northeast Texas and also near Texarkana, eastern Oklahoma, seeing that threat lingering into the early morning hours. So let's talk about what we have going on, the ingredients in play. We've got the warm front surging north, so temperatures are on the rise. The Gulf of Mexico is wide open, bringing in that moisture, that instability. We've got plenty of daytime heating, but the key is the mid-level jet is what's going to enhance that supercell development and potential that we're going to see here across the Midwest. So here's a look at the future radar. Notice we're going into the morning hours. We have storms rolling through the Ohio River Valley, but look at this line pushing through Tulsa and parts of western Missouri. Damaging wind threat, a huge ordeal. But we want to take you live to Paul Goodlow's location in Wichita Falls, Texas, where he's keeping a close eye to the skies. Paul?
We're feeling the winds continue to increase here and even some sunshine breaking out as well. What you do not want to see, because that's going to help bring more thermals or vertical motion into the upper atmosphere, which has some shear going on, which could be the instigator of strong and severe thunderstorms. So it's going to be a dangerous day turning into afternoon, turning into evening and overnight period across parts of Texas and Oklahoma. We'll have live coverage for you all day long right here on the Weather Channel.
This program brought to you by Captain D's. The Captain is calling.
Welcome back to Weather Center Live. I'm meteorologist Paul Goodlow live in Wichita Falls, Texas, and we're perhaps on the verge of the most severe day we've seen so far this year across this area of Texas and the southern plains. The Storm Prediction Center did issue a high-risk area for this part of Texas into Oklahoma, meaning there is a likelihood, a strong confidence that they will see long track tornadoes, and those type of tornadoes that could cause a lot of damage for miles and miles and miles. Here in Wichita Falls, Texas, we had an EF5 tornado back in 1979, so 40 years ago, which did in $79 $400 million worth of damage, like nearly $500 million. That was 40 years ago, so it's amazing the damage here. And the concern is, are people ready? We talked to the emergency manager here in Wichita County earlier about that question.
We don't very often see this degree of preparedness this early on. Hurricanes, you get days to prepare, and tornadoes usually just get a few minutes kind of deal. But today, the National Weather Service, kudos to them. They've really done a great job the last few days preparing us to get ready to go for this.
Yeah, I want to go ahead and say thank you to the men and women at the National Weather Service Office, also Storm Prediction Center. They will be working overtime today and tonight because the concern is, at least here in Wichita Falls, Texas, the timing of this line is going to be after dark and really after midnight as well. We could definitely see some scattered showers and thunderstorms before that, but the line that could contain tornadoes probably developing west of here and then rolling through Wichita Falls as we head, say, 2, 3, 4 a.m. in the morning, and then as the sun comes up, say around 6:30 or so, things start to quiet down. And just looking at the observations, we're feeling increasing winds from the south now, gusting over 20 miles per hour. Our dew point has gone from the low 50s yesterday to almost the mid 70s right now. With little blue sky out here, the sun has warmed us up to 81 degrees, and the pressure is falling as well. I want to bring in Dr. Greg Postel. And Greg, it seems like we're just doing nothing but adding more fuel to this, just waiting for that one spark, which maybe hours away from going, and once it goes, this could be a very stormy, maybe 24-hour period for a lot of folks here in Texas and Oklahoma.
Yeah, and Paul, I think the spark is being lit in a couple of places right now in the panhandle of Texas. I'll get to that radar in a second. We've got a couple of severe thunderstorm warnings out there, but I want to sort of give you the sort of step back and look at the overall view. If you haven't tuned in, you need to, and you need to be aware of what your tornado plan is or your severe thunderstorm plan is today for dangerous weather moving in. Know how to protect yourself from the possibility of a tornado. Get in an interior room, away from windows, as many walls as you can between you and the outside, and also at a lower level or the lowest level that you possibly can be on, because I do believe there will be lots of tornadoes today, and some of them particularly violent given the atmospheric parameters that are in place. We've got really all the ingredients in there at the very high end of the scale, higher than I've seen in a long time, and that is saying a lot. I'm an old guy, so that means something, hopefully. Current radar right now, we've got some thunderstorms in southern Kansas, northern Oklahoma. Those are not so ripe to become tornadic, and I don't think they will be. They're moving away from the front into a more stable environment. Those are elevated storms. But I'm watching in the panhandle of Texas right now, where we actually have a couple of severe thunderstorm warnings just north of Vega, Texas, out here north of I-40. Right in there, severe thunderstorm warning for Oldham, Potter counties. I've been watching this storm now for the last 20 minutes or so. It's got some broad rotation in that, likely supercell, depending on how long it lasts. And it is still in an environment that is supportive of tornadoes. It's got that access to some moist air that's coming into it from the southeast right there. And Chris Warren was just mentioning, looking at the visible satellite pictures, that the low-level winds are pretty obviously moving in that direction, even on the satellite pictures. But at high altitudes, the wind is coming out of a very different direction, out of the southwest, screaming at 80 to 100 miles per hour, maybe 10,000 feet above the ground. And that is the direction that these storms are eventually going to be taking, toward that northeast direction, away, in this case, away from that greater instability. So maybe these will sort of potentially retain their severe characteristics, but then in the next couple of hours, if they still are around, move off into that more stable air. But we got to keep an eye on where it's not happening. And this is one of the things you need to be getting used to today. For example, where are some of the earlier signs maybe of some development? Are we starting to see some agitation here in the cumulus field? Are we starting to see some development of thunderstorms out in this zone? That may be the case, and that's a problem because, as I mentioned, the atmosphere is ripe for development. If you look at some of these composite parameters that are designed to measure how capable the atmosphere is for tornadoes, again, it's all on the high end of the scale out in here, and this is only going to expand in coverage. So when you, for example, look at the forecast, these are kind of ominous and quite scary, in fact, to look at going out in time. This is the HRRR model, one that's trying to forecast anyway, as best it can, where thunderstorms are going to be. But I can tell you any one of these, assuming they do form, could be tornadic, long-track tornadoes, large hail, and damaging straight-line winds. They're going to be roaming all across Oklahoma and Kansas, we think, throughout the nighttime hours. We'll be right back.
We're breaking right now on the Weather Channel. The Storm Prediction Center has issued a tornado watch, which is significant on its own right. However, this is not your everyday, ordinary tornado watch. This is a PDS, a particularly dangerous situation. So a tornado watch that has been classified as a PDS, particularly dangerous situation, expecting long-track tornadoes, some of which could be strong. It is not a matter of if we're going to have tornadoes today. It's a matter of where tornadoes happen and when they form. And the PDS, a particularly dangerous situation, issued by the Storm Prediction Center, it's used for when tornado watches are expecting long-lived and even intense tornadoes, where it is likely, not just possible, but likely. And this doesn't happen very much. Of all the tornado watches that are issued, only 3% are PDS tornado watches. And this does include a huge portion of Texas. And you can see parts of West Texas and the Panhandle. And there, also in Texas, we want to go to Paul Goodlow, who is there just to the east of where that PDS is right now. And Paul, when you start to see this, we knew it was going to be a big day, a potentially dangerous day, which is yet to unravel and unfold. What does that tell you when you hear one thing after another? In Oklahoma, some schools have been canceled. Now the Storm Prediction Center issuing a PDS ahead of the storms popping. What does that tell you? What does that make you feel like as you're standing in one of the threat areas?
I'm definitely concerned because you show that watch area, Chris, west of where we are here in Wichita County. But the concern is this is going to be a kind of equation of geometry. So these storms, when they fire up and possibly produce tornadoes, they're not just rolling west or rolling northward. They're rolling basically from the southwest to the northeast. They're covering a lot of terrain across this area, and then as they march east as well. So it could be a thing where, storms are firing up during dinner time, and you're thinking, okay, it's bedtime. They still haven't gotten here. Then you go to bed. Next thing you know, they finally gotten your doorstep here in this part of North Texas and Northwest Texas. So this is a concern. This watch is out here pretty early and goes through 8 p.m. and we do expect other watches to be issued as well. And each one of these tornado watches, all of them will be particularly dangerous situations, meaning they have a high confidence that they will be dealing with some long-tracked tornadoes, meaning tornadoes on the ground for a while. And a big concern here in Wichita Falls, Texas. They had an EF5 on the ground for miles here 40 years ago, which devastated this community. A lot of people who have lived through that and still live here, they often reference that as well. So it's still a huge concern, and it's that timing. Dr. Purcell has been showing you the timing graphics as well, so have you, Chris, and it's all about overnight. The sun sets here, after 8:30, doesn't come up till 6:30. It's during that window, especially in the middle of that window, say from 1 a.m. to about 4 a.m. when you might be snug as a bug in your bed, you could have, next thing you know, tornado upon you. So you got to make sure you have a way to get notified, have a safe place. We've been showing you people who have storm shelters here in Wichita Falls, but not everyone has that. So you got to have a safe spot where you are, mobile home. Find a safe spot out of that. There's no safe shelter inside a mobile home, so it's definitely something that we keep stressing is you got to have a plan. Hopefully you never need it, and there's no tornado for you, but you got to be safe. You got to, each and every time we have this threat, you got to be safe. Chris?
And Paul, once this threat gets realized, it's really going to get going, and there's going to be a lot of individual storms that we're going to be tracking here. So we're still on the front end of this on what we know is a dangerous day when it comes to severe weather and the possibility for tornadoes, and illustrating that and also highlighting that to getting the word out, the Storm Prediction Center there in Norman, Oklahoma, which does cover the entire nation. The Storm Prediction Center issuing a tornado watch that has been tagged a PDS, a particularly dangerous situation. Only 3% of tornado watches are PDS watches, long track tornadoes, not just possible but likely today. Tornadoes, they're going to happen. We are expecting tornadoes today. It's just a matter of when they occur and exactly where they go, where they form, and where they ultimately go. And this is one of the areas we're watching here in parts of Texas, from Lubbock over to Childress, and then eventually into Oklahoma as well. Right now, pretty quiet. Starting to, Chris, see a little inkling of some showers, and it's just a matter of time. It's going to be happening while we are on the air with you here on the Weather Channel. So we're going to continue to follow this. Chris, we're going to be on for another 3.5 hours, but we're watching right now, still in the early stages of this.
Yeah, so let's get you up to speed with this high risk that we're talking about. We're talking about the Southern Plains. This includes large metropolitan areas from Oklahoma City off towards the west into parts of the Texas Panhandle, even including north central Texas like Wichita Falls. So when we talk about high risk that has been trending on Twitter, do you really understand what that means? Well, it's issued when a severe weather outbreak is expected, and not only that, we're expecting pretty high confidence in either long track tornadoes or derechos, which are damaging winds, can be just as destructive. The last time we had a high risk day was a couple of years ago, back in 2017. Think Tuscaloosa, Alabama. That was a similar type setup. So this is the situation we're dealing with, and those type of large wedge tornadoes are certainly a high likelihood, a good possibility, especially in these supercells. Right now we're tracking a very heavy rain event here into Kansas and northern Oklahoma, but we're still waiting for the cap to break and those supercells to really start to fire up. You can see this here on our future radar. Look at this, very indicative of what we're going to be going into as we head towards your evening into dinner time, and that risk is going to continue even after we go into the overnight hours, which is another whole danger in and of itself. We'll be right back.
Stream your news just like everything else you love with Local Now. It's completely free and ready to go when and where you are. Local Now. Find it in your favorite app store.
A flash flood watch is in effect. Currently in our area, 56 degrees with showers. Today, rain developing during the afternoon. High 58. Rainfall around a ½ inch. Tonight, windy with thunderstorms. Low 53. Tuesday, thunderstorms likely. A few storms may be severe. High 73. Here's our 7-day outlook.
Welcome back to With Us on Live. I'm meteorologist Paul Griffith, live in Wichita Falls, Texas. We're on the verge of perhaps the most severe weather we've seen in Texas and the Southern Plains so far this year. In fact, behind me, you see downtown Wichita. The winds have been increasing, coming in from the south and southeast. We've seen it sustain now around 20, gusting to 30 miles per hour. It's not just the wind. That wind is bringing in more moisture. We're talking our dew points yesterday in the low 50s, very dry air mass. Today they've been coming up and up. Now we're in the low to mid 70s in our dew point. That's a tropical feeling air mass here in North Texas. That's going to add more fuel for thunderstorms. Take a look at the sky here. We're starting to see some blue sky. The concern is our temperature shot up from the mid 60s this morning to the low 80s. So what that is doing, the sun is coming down. And whether it's a grassy field or even this parking lot, the ground's heating the air starts to rise. This high humidity, it starts to rise even faster. Very unstable atmosphere. And then aloft, we have different shear zones. That starts things spinning as well. All this could feed into a very dangerous day, not only here in Wichita Falls, but much of this part of West Texas, the Panhandle into Oklahoma as well. And all this is being fueled by a storm, which right now is dumping snow across parts of New Mexico and even Colorado. I want to bring in Dr. Greg Postel to talk more about this. And Dr. Postel, this is like the second storm system that slammed the West in the matter of, 3 or 4 days now. It's really the reason why we have such a large chance for tornadoes today and tonight, even tomorrow.
Yeah, and Paul, associated with those incredible temperature contrasts that you're inferring, and Chris, I'll bring you guys in there. He's talking about snow in the west, and it's really hot in the east, and in between we've got a very strong wind, very strong jet stream over the Southern Plains. That's fueling this severe weather outbreak that we've got. And if you look at the maps, and guys, you've seen this, we've got a high risk of severe weather today outlined here in those areas in Oklahoma and nearby Texas.
What is it in this particular outbreak that separates, past outbreaks we've seen this year and in past years?
Those are really good questions, and I think it's exactly kind of what Paul was trying to get to in the fact talking about snow in the west. It's the strong jet stream that is in place, howling aloft over this warm sector that is getting very unstable in this region. So we have got a setup that is particularly favorable for not just supercells, thunderstorms, large hail, and your standard severe weather. Very favorable conditions for tornadoes, and this area is going to be expanding, I believe, throughout much of that sort of little pie-shaped wedge area ahead of that dry line and south that warm. Moving away into more stable air, not likely to become severe. Maybe here and there that might trigger a severe thunderstorm warning, with the primary hazard being large hail. But I'm kind of got my eye on right in there, not far from Amarillo. Let's go there because we have a severe thunderstorm warning. This storm potentially carries some hail and some damaging winds with it. These are the counties for about another 25 minutes. But notice how quickly they're moving off toward the northeast. That's carried by the very strong wind aloft. And pretty soon these storms will be out over here, where they're away from the moist air and into much more stable and cooler air to the northeast. So I believe these storms will eventually become elevated. It's in an area farther to the south that I'm much more concerned about across parts of the panhandle of Texas and farther to the south, where we've got a tornado watch out until 8 o'clock local time. That is a particularly dangerous situation. And guys, I'm watching the skies here for some agitated cumulus here, growing cumulus towers. Some are already precipitating in that region, shown up by the radar just to the east-southeast of Lubbock, Texas. This is also in an environment that is supportive of tornadoes. So this is the kind of thing, Chris Bruin and Chris Warren, we're going to have to be watching very carefully. What are the trends in the radar and the satellite in the next 15 minutes, the next half an hour, to helping us determine where the big risks are going to be?
I want to talk about your confidence here for tornadoes. Do you see anything that's possible, reasonable, that says it could be a bust, that there won't be tornadoes?
No, I don't think so.
There's going to be tornadoes.
Yes, and I think there are some limiting factors. Maybe we can hope that instead of seeing, say, dozens of discrete supercells later on today over Oklahoma and Texas, the kind that produce tornadoes, maybe we get into a situation where there's more lines of storms. Those can contain tornadoes, no doubt, and carry with them damaging wind threat. But perhaps if we see a line of storms later on this evening, overnight tonight, maybe the tornado threat comes down a bit. Still pretty high tornado threat, but maybe not in the extreme end that even now some of the models are still suggesting we have that after dark.
But what do you think? You think we are going to see?
Well, I don't really, it's a really tough call. I think we're going to start off with lots of discrete supercells. I think that's going to be the early mode, and that's a real problem because the atmosphere, as we talked about through all the ingredients, is very, very supportive of long track tornadoes, the kind that last a long time and are particularly dangerous and violent. That's something we have to watch for.
All right, Dr. Postel, thank you so much. We're also watching the very latest information coming into the Weather Channel. Here's what we know at this hour. A lot of communities responding to the dangerous weather threat, and public schools in Oklahoma City and more Oklahoma already closed today. Classes have been also canceled at the University of Oklahoma and at Oklahoma State. Again, a particularly dangerous situation. All aircraft have been evacuated from Tigger Air Force Base near Oklahoma City ahead of what we are expecting to be a dangerous tornado outbreak.
And our crews are fanned out across the areas at greatest risk today. All of us will keep you ahead of this very dangerous weather situation all day and all night. That includes areas from Texas into Oklahoma and Kansas. It's not just extremely long track and dangerous tornadoes. We're talking all hazards, including hail, damaging winds, and flash flooding.
All right, welcome back into the Weather Channel. I'm meteorologist Tevin Woon joining you from the plains of Oklahoma, Sayre, Oklahoma, where we are tracking what may be a potentially dangerous day here, not just in Sayre, Oklahoma, but for much of the state. Again, I'm meteorologist Tevin Woon joining you this hour, and let's take you through what we have right now because we know that this will be a very volatile day somewhere. Now, not everyone will see a tornado. That's one thing we do want to admit. But for those that do, this could certainly be a deadly and volatile situation. If you're not careful, we're going to do our very best to take you through it and get you through this situation throughout the day today. Live coverage, by the way, all through the night and into tomorrow morning as this threat goes on. So again, Sayre, Oklahoma right now, 71 degrees. It is certainly moist out here and muggy. You can feel the air, 67-degree dew points. That's tropical moisture coming in out of the south. And I can actually show you that. Let's go to the sky right now. We're coming in out of the south. You can see those clouds racing by. The winds have been coming in right around 21 miles an hour. That's not gusts. Those are sustained winds. So we are pumping in this moisture almost like we're going to the gas station. We're pumping in some gas here, that fuel for these thunderstorms to really grow, develop, and punch through. That's what we're likely to see today. So take this threat very seriously. Again, the winds are coming out of the south at about 21 miles an hour, sustained gusts at around 28 to 30 miles an hour. And that's something that's sort of new to today. Yesterday, the winds were coming out of the east right around 15 to 20 miles an hour. But the moment that southerly flow kicked in, it kicked in with a vengeance. So why does that matter? Well, here down towards the ground, if the winds are stronger, aloft or higher up or upstairs in the atmosphere, they are much stronger. They're going to come through. Those things will race right around 80 to 90 knots. And then another thing we can look at here, look at how this tree line is sort of semi-permanently tilted toward the right. That's from the west or from the south towards the north, almost due south to due north, if you will. So that lets you know that the trees are sort of under the influence of that southerly flow, pumping in that moisture. But again, the winds out of the south at the surface, that's one thing. You go upstairs, they're coming out of the southwest. Why does that matter, Tevin? Well, we have turning of winds with height. That's one shear, directional shear, and then the speed shear, the going from the 15 to 20 miles an hour or 25 at the surface to the 80 or 90 knots, which, by the way, that's about 100 miles an hour. So we have been in some bouts of rain showers here or there as we made our way here. We were in Stillwater, Oklahoma this morning. We woke up, we made the trek here right around 2.5 hours. And let me tell you, this landscape, we can only hope some of these strongest storms and tornadoes go through the unpopulated areas. But there are populated areas in western Oklahoma, central Oklahoma, and for much of the state. And it is a way of life here when you're dealing with thunderstorms and tornadoes. Just down the street, shelters everywhere you go, not just above ground shelters for people, below ground shelters. So they have a plan. We have a plan. You two at home should have a plan for today and tonight. Let's get back into the studio now with Dr. Greg Postel, expert analysis you will only see here on the Weather Channel. Before we do that, I want to mention one thing I'm noticing here. Sunshine coming in. That's going to add more fuel to this equation here. So Dr. Postel, we can only hope again that some of those strong storms come through the unpopulated areas or the less populated. Open fields is what you want, but we can't always hope. We have to plan.
Yes, remain aware, keep updated on the forecast and the current conditions, have a plan of safety, of action when there is a tornado warning or even a severe thunderstorm warning issued, because right now we are sort of seeing a growing environment that is becoming ever more conducive to tornadoes. The parameters out there that kind of measure all the ingredients are kind of on the high end of the scale. A lot of them are together. Normally you might see one or two, like the wind shear or the instability or some of the other things that we look at. This case has a lot of them, if not all of them, and we're seeing that area that is growing more and more favorable for tornadoes. It's getting larger and it's expanding coverage, particularly across parts of Texas and southwestern Oklahoma in those areas. Now, right now, when you look at the radar on top of all that, you don't see a whole lot of storminess in those places. That's a good thing. Most of the storms are up here in Kansas and Oklahoma into a more stable environment, not likely to be severe. Maybe there'll be a severe warning or two, but unlikely to be tornadic. It's in this zone down in here that we've got to pay very close attention to in the next couple of hours or even sooner than that, because there are thunderstorms here now starting to bubble up in that unstable air, or at least very near it. These could become severe very quickly and quickly produce tornadoes. So we have to watch out for that. Right now, this north of Amarillo, Texas is a severe thunderstorm warning. This is one that we've been watching. It's got some broad rotation in it, no signs of a tornadic circulation. And there is some good news here in this one. It may, if it continues on its path, run away from the instability and find itself in a cooler, more stable environment near the ground and become elevated. And those are less likely to produce tornadoes than other kinds. So that's a good thing, that maybe these will kind of of move away from the area that we're watching ominously for the potential for particularly dangerous tornadoes. That's what the watch says. This is not your ordinary tornado watch. This is a tornado box out here that is a particularly dangerous situation, one that's not issued very often by the Storm Prediction Center. The risk for significant violent tornadoes and long-track tornadoes definitely in play. Now let's look at the visible satellite picture because we can learn a lot and figure out, okay, where's the next stuff going to happen? We're watching here, there's a couple of breaks in some of the high-level cirrus clouds and actually some convergence right near the ground. In other words, some winds coming out maybe slightly different speed or some slightly different direction even, just a little bit, allowing some development here. You can actually see that in some of those brighter colors or brighter shades of white. So let's look at it with the radar. Aha, there you go. We're starting to see at least a lone thunderstorm here southeast of Lubbock, Texas. Not yet warned, but may be able to produce some small hail. The tops are about 40,000 feet on that one. It is overall in an environment, if not in, very near to an environment that's favorable, very favorable for tornadoes. That's what I kind of shaded here. This is that parameter that the Storm Prediction Center has developed and used, and is in a way to give you an idea of, well, this is the area to watch very closely for big-time tornadoes. And it is indeed all across this zone. It does include Wichita Falls, southwestern Oklahoma, and areas nearby in the Panhandle of Texas. One more graphic I want to show before I move on. This is now a forecast of the radar. It's not perfect, but the idea and what it's telling us is a story about the kind of storms, the mode of storms that's going to be most likely this afternoon. And these are discrete supercells, all in a place where they can, any one of them, produce a really nasty tornado. So we have to watch out all afternoon in that zone. And by overnight tonight, maybe we start to see more linear features develop with some forcing that is going to try to draw things out in a line. That might reduce the tornado threat a little bit. But that is a long way off, and that is right now only a hope. Chris, back to you.
And I'm going to come back to you, Dr. Postel, and I want to talk about the visible satellites.
Yeah,
so
let's go
I know you're going to listen to me while I ask you the question. You get that ready. The next couple of hours, I think the visible satellite, it's really going to be one of the areas that give us the first clues where the storms are going to start popping, right?
Yeah.
Is that fair to say? We'll see that. And then the radar.
Yes, it's one of those. They kind of go together, but yeah, you can actually sometimes see it on the radar even before that. But right, okay, I like that.
But either one, but this one right here has a lot more on it, right? Because because this is before the rain starts. What is it? What are the areas? Well, what are the clues that you're going to be looking at for the initiation of development? What's that one piece of weather data that you're most interested in watching over the next, say, hour, 2 hours, 3 hours to see, hey, where's that first big storm going to be?
Well, this may be one of them, and is already showing up on radar with some bright reds in the radar reflectivity returns, suggesting hail potentially. And notice some of these high clouds, Chris, are streaming off in that direction very quickly. There's a substantial amount of wind shear, really strong winds aloft. And that's not necessarily just high up in the cloud. It's also a little bit off the ground. So we're getting a lot of wind shear that is going to be capable of supporting tornadic storms going forward. So yes, let's look at that. And let me get to that radar, Chris, real quick. Stay with me. Go back, if you can, go back to that radar. I talked about those bright reds showing up right in there. We have to watch out for some of these storms and see if they sort of hold on to their intensity for a little while longer, because any one of these could be tornadic at a moment's notice.
And what's your biggest concern? What worries you the most? If you had family all throughout Oklahoma and Texas, what would you be most concerned about? What would worry you over the next couple hours?
Not being aware of what's going on. And I think we need to all be aware. I think we need to pay attention to the radar, to the satellite looking out. I mean, aware of the forecast and the current conditions. And if you do get a warning, know what to do. Now, if you get a tornado warning, move to an interior section of your structure, away from windows.
Right, so you're saying, I mean, basically, we know there's going to be tornadoes today. But what we don't know is exactly where the storms are going to develop. Is that really what you're saying there?
Yes, but that's right. And it's almost a now-casting mode, where we're going to have to watch the radar and the satellite trends almost minute by minute. There's no way to really know an hour from now what's going to happen. Watch with us now, and we're starting to see some stuff blow up in Texas that could be significant in the next half an hour.
And an illustration of just how serious and how confident forecasters, including us, are in the fact there will be tornadoes today is our Torcon. You don't see this very often. And we're going to show you that in just a second. But first, showing you the clouds here in Oklahoma City. And Dr. Postel, oftentimes when you see clouds like this, it can mean, hey, we're not getting as much sun, which further destabilizes the atmosphere. That's really not going to be much of a factor, though, is it?
No, it's going to get more and more unstable in Oklahoma City eventually. The sun probably will break out later today at some form or another, and we are going to see the conditions very favorable for tornadoes in and around the Oklahoma City area. So what you see now, and you might think, okay, well, it's cloudy, cool. It's going to change. It's going to change soon.
Yeah, and with the anticipation of that change here at the Weather Channel, we have issued a 9 out of 10 on our exclusive Torcon. So think about this. If a Torcon is ever issued, I mean, this goes from 1 to 10, that means there's a threat for tornadoes. And the higher the number, the greater the risk. The more confident we are there will be tornadoes today. So is 9 out of 10, that's a 90% chance there will be a tornado. If you are in Oklahoma City on one of the tall buildings looking around, there's a 90% chance a tornado is going to come through within a 50-mile radius.
Hey,
so,
Chris, let's go to the visual satellite picture right around
Are you starting to see something right now?
No, not yet, but well, actually, yes. Clearing skies just to the south of Oklahoma City. You were looking at that camera, that tower cam before, where it was stratus clouds and all kinds of layers with cloudy skies. There are breaks in the clouds now showing up all across southern Oklahoma, where the air mass is getting more and more unstable, and I think the warm front is actually somewhere up in there, not far from I-40. So much more unstable air and conditions very favorable for tornadoes. That is beginning to expand across central Oklahoma.
Something here too, Post. So as we stay on the visible satellite, you see how there's kind of like rows of clouds, almost like crops. When you plow a field, get ready to seed, do you see how there's kind of like a line of white and then there's some dark where the sun's getting through? Do you make anything of that?
Right in here.
Yes, all of that. Does that the striation kind of look? Does that tell you anything?
Well, what it tells us is that you need to watch, because on the edges of where it's cloudy and where it's clear, sometimes you can get enough what's called convergence at the ground to initiate thunderstorms. So you can get development of storms right on the edges of those slots, so to speak, and that's one place to look for.
This might sound a little counterintuitive, but essentially, Dr. Postel, I think it's fair to say that sometimes when we talk about nowcasting, part of that is the weather essentially creates itself in a way. Do you think that's a fair statement? We talk about outflow boundaries and the way some clouds are developing right now can influence what happens in the near future.
Yes, that's the whole nonlinearity of Mother Nature. One thing interacts with the other thing and then goes back to interact the first thing. Yes, it all kind of feeds back on itself. And we got to watch these areas, Chris. You are so right. These clearing areas and all now across parts of southern Oklahoma, the environment is getting more and more ripe for the development of storms. But the good news is right now there aren't any. But we got to watch very carefully. And I'm going to go back to what's going on in the panhandle of Texas, because I'm watching just southeast of Lubbock, Texas. Now, this is to the left is Oklahoma City on your screen, and to the right, and there we go, full screen here. We've got Lubbock, Texas, with the thunderstorm here that we've got to watch carefully. Now, it's not clear whether this is going to survive. There's very strong wind shear if the shear is going to dominate this thing and tear it apart, or on the other hand, it's actually in an environment that is got a lot of buoyancy potential, so those updrafts may be able to withstand that very strong vertical shear. But yes, this kind of has my eye, this whole area right in here, and that is one of the areas that we were looking at earlier on the visible satellite picture.
And that also eventually is an area where tornadoes are a possibility with the PDS, particularly dangerous situation, as we are more than likely here on the front end here of what eventually will be, Chris, a tornado outbreak, unfortunately.
Yeah, we're talking 90% chance. I mean, that's almost as high as it gets. And we're thinking, just a few days in past history where we've had this type of threat. So take a look here at what we're dealing with. There's a look at Oklahoma City at 9 on the Torcon, and that's just for Oklahoma City. So a 90% chance of seeing a tornado within 50 miles of your location. The greatest risk coming late this afternoon. Let's talk about the fact that this is going to continue well after sunset. So the fact that we could see nighttime tornadoes is much more deadly and dangerous, because now we're 2.5 times more likely to kill. Nighttime tornadoes are 2.5 times more likely to kill than daytime tornadoes, primarily because people are sleeping and they're not hearing the warning. So make sure you have a loud alarm and go to your settings on either your iPhone or your Droid, and make sure you can adjust that volume and have an alarm that would even wake you up. And if you don't have a safe spot, go over to your neighbor's house, have a plan in place for when these tornado warnings will likely be issued. So extreme high risk event here from North Texas Into Oklahoma, we're talking torcons that will continue tonight as well in east central Oklahoma, where we have an 8 on the torcon. And when we look at, places like Wichita Falls, Chris, even a 5 or a 50% chance of seeing a tornado in the 50 miles of your location, that'll be especially greatest overnight tonight in places like Wichita Falls, Texas.
And Chris, we knew this was going to be a potentially dangerous day. Days in advance.
It's been a week now. We've been watching this.
We've been watching this day, and communities taking notice, already responding to this dangerous threat of severe weather and tornadoes. Here's what we know at this hour at the Weather Channel. Both the University of Oklahoma and Oklahoma State closed today. So are public schools in Oklahoma City and more. Tinker Air Force Base is closed as well, ahead of what is expected to be a dangerous tornado outbreak. Let's get back into the field with Tevin Wooten. Tevin.
Yep, and we are in Sayre, Oklahoma. I'm going to take you up to the sky. That instability that we don't want to see, that sunshine, that's another ingredient that we have that will come into this equation and will likely spur this tornado outbreak. Coverage continues here on the Weather Channel.
Stream your news just like everything else you love with Local Now. It's completely free and ready to go when and where you are. Local Now. Find it in your favorite app store.
A flash flood watch is in effect. Currently in our area, 55 degrees under mostly cloudy skies. Today, rain likely. High 57, winds east-northeast at 15 to 25 miles per hour. Rainfall near 1/4 inch. Tonight, windy with thunderstorms. Low 53. Here's our 7-day outlook.
All right, we're back here on Weather Center Live. I'm meteorologist Tevin Wooten joining you from Sayre, Oklahoma, one of the areas in the high risk for severe weather for the day today. But there is so much more around Sayre, Oklahoma, Elk City, back into Texas and south and west from here, all the way over along portions of I-40 into Oklahoma City. But let's take you through this landscape, because one of the misconceptions of Oklahoma is it's flatlands. And for the most part, it is. In fact, that's sort of the picture of the landscape you would typically see if you're driving, say, on I-40 westbound from Oklahoma City to Elk City to Sayre, Oklahoma. But I'll very quickly kind of rotate you this way, because this is where you start to get into Sayre, Oklahoma. 8 mile or about 5 miles back that's where you have about 15,000 people that live. So that's a population center. And then say 8 miles as the crow flies towards the south and southwest, that's where you have Delhi. And they've actually had their fair share of severe weather in the past with tornadoes. They're no stranger to tornadoes here in Oklahoma. In fact, they have tornado shelters underground and above ground. Some of the churches, some of the schools, they are safe rooms. But I mentioned that south. That's going to be key because we have that southerly flow. That's going to bring in some moisture. And occasionally you can see the trees start to slant, if you will, as the winds pick up, sustained between 20 and 25, but gusts between 28 and 30. So that's thing number one. Thing number two, it can be a sort of a misconception, if you will, the daytime heating. Sure, you walk out, if you're not a weather nerd or a weather aficionado, you walk outside, you see blue sky, you see the sunshine, you think, oh, we're A-okay. That is not the case today. You do not want to see that blue sky, and you don't want to see that sunshine. The sunshine combined with that low-level moisture transport coming in from the Gulf of Mexico, that will be a dangerous and volatile combination for the day today that will cause some thunderstorms and tornadoes too. Let's get you to the active weather right now in the studio with Chris.
All right, Tevin, yeah, let's get everybody up to date with what we have going on right now. We do have a tornado watch in effect through 8 p.m. local time here. This includes Amarillo, Lubbock, Abilene, Texas, all the way down between I-40 and I-20. This is where we're going to really keep a close watch on for supercells and extremely dangerous tornadoes, because this has come with a PDS, meaning a particularly dangerous situation tagged with it. Notice over the last hour we have seen a cluster of storms starting to develop, now producing lightning and growing in size. So this will be a spot to watch just to the southeast of Lubbock. We can show you this here on the radar. Notice how that has formed showers and now some hefty thunderstorms, intense downpours moving southeast of Lubbock. So we're going to keep a close watch on this storm and what could potentially turn into a supercell. And that's how quick things are going to develop. It starts off as a shower and then quickly becomes, a supercell. So zooming in a little bit closely, Lubbock right now you're not in play, but here just northwest of Post, Oklahoma, or Texas, that's where we have that concerning cell. And then also into parts of extreme North Texas, here's Dumas, north of Amarillo. We have a very large supercell, but it's moving into some stabler air, so likely becomes aloft and weakening as it pushes into some cooler air into parts of western Oklahoma. But more takes shelter now, 1:45 p.m. local time. The problem is things are really going to get developed quickly. Things go from, a sunny afternoon and you see these clouds develop and they turn into supercells. So where are we looking at as we go into tonight, Chris, and what is your biggest concern?
Well, it's parts of Texas right now and into Oklahoma that we're going to be watching. I was just talking with Dr. Greg Postel. We were looking at the satellite, and things are starting to get more and more interesting, as we were expecting it to, as far as where the storms eventually are going to get going. So we're still essentially early on in this, what could be a tornado outbreak, early on in the event, and we're starting to see signs that the atmosphere is about to go, that things are going to really start to get underway here. And these are the areas we are most concerned about. These areas here in purple and white, you see these, oftentimes we have one or two shades of red on there, but when you get in all these different shades in the purple and the white, expecting a very high likelihood there will be some strong storms today, which includes long track tornadoes. So they're on the ground or in progress for a long time, which gives them a greater opportunity to hit stuff, unfortunately, and the possibility that some of these storms are going to be very strong too. Some of these tornadoes could be quite intense as well.
And long-lived. All right, well, it's a big deal when officials have decided to cancel school in many parts of Oklahoma. Right now, parts of Oklahoma and Texas are under a torcon of a 9. That's the highest torcon that we've seen in this year. That means there's a 90% chance of seeing a tornado within 50 miles of your location. The emergency management coordinator for Wichita County, Texas, says they're on heightened alert.
We don't very often see this degree of preparedness this early on. Hurricanes, you get days to prepare, and tornadoes usually just get, a few minutes kind of deal. But today, the National Weather Service, kudos to them. They've really done a great job the last few days preparing us to get ready to go for this.
And Wichita County also says all of their resources are in place. All their equipment has been checked and fueled up, their communication double checked, and their weather spotter network has been put into place, so they're ready to respond to these storms as they fire. All right, we're going to take a brief break and take a look at what we're expecting into the Northeast, because that's another part of the country under a severe thunderstorm watch.
Yeah, and we're doing this because we have a little bit of time here before things really start to get bad, and we have a lot of warnings. And so we want to let you know where also some warnings are possible today, and that is the Northeast. So in the next couple of hours, we might not have a chance to talk too much about this. We want to make sure we do while we can. It's possible some severe weather. In fact, the Storm Prediction Center in Norman, Oklahoma has issued a severe thunderstorm watch where conditions do remain favorable in parts of the Northeast and New England here for some strong storms until about 9 o'clock this evening. And right now, some storms are firing across parts of Maine and Vermont at the moment. And looking at the visible satellite and the radar, you're getting an inkling here of where some of that action is happening right now. And as the day wears on, as the atmosphere destabilizes, as the sun warms things up, more storms expected to fire. And you can see that here on the future radar. Things really get going this evening, as they will throughout the middle part of the U.S. Back to the southern plains here on the Weather Channel with live team coverage.
Welcome back into Weather Center Live on what is guaranteed to be a very, very volatile day when it comes to severe weather. I'm meteorologist Tevin Wooten joining you from Sayre, Oklahoma. Let's take you through the latest information right now. Just check some of the information from the Storm Prediction Center out of Norman, Oklahoma. They are saying there is a 95% chance that a watch will be issued soon, somewhere within this high-risk area. So we're talking about areas near Lawton, Oklahoma, Oklahoma City, along portions of Oklahoma City. And what that instantly means is that any watch issued inside of that high-risk environment is a particularly dangerous situation. That's sort of the upper echelon, if you will, of tornado watches and severe thunderstorm watches. So take that very seriously here. The last time we had a high risk in Kansas and Oklahoma, May 2017, 36 tornadoes that day. Today, likely going to see the same thing, if not if not worse. So take that very seriously. Again, this is something you don't want to take lightly here. If you are in any of this area, you're likely to see a tornado. Or if you're in that high-risk area, or even outside of that, it doesn't take the highest risk. A moderate risk can also do the same thing. Where we are right now in Sayre, Oklahoma, as a meteorologist, I've been talking about the winds coming in out of the south. That's one key component. That's a moisture transport device, if you will. So all of the air from the Gulf of Mexico, those higher dew points in the mid-60s and upper 60s, that's coming in out of the south. The winds have been nonstop already today, barely at midday here in Sayre, Oklahoma. So we're pumping in that moisture. The trees are swaying every which way back and forth as that moisture comes in. But aloft, higher up in the atmosphere, we're noticing a turning of winds with height. That's directional shear. A speed shear also as the winds pick up higher up in the atmosphere. And then one more thing, we've been talking about that sunshine. It almost wants to make me take off my jacket at times because we do get that hot that quickly. It does not take much, folks. Seriously, you don't want to take this seriously. We have our shelter. So should you. And let's take you into the studio right now with expert analysis you will only see here on the Weather Channel. Dr. Greg Postel, take it away.
Thank you very much. We are watching and monitoring very closely areas in the Texas Panhandle and southwestern Oklahoma for the development of pretty bad thunderstorms with a strong likelihood of significant tornadoes in the next couple of hours. A tornado outbreak appears likely. Here's one of the most recent watch that has been issued by the Storm Prediction Center. That goes until 8 o'clock tonight. This is what's called a particularly dangerous situation, one that is especially ripe and capable of producing violent tornadoes. Long track violent tornadoes are definitely in play today, I think, across the region. Now, the visual satellite picture is extremely instructive because it's telling us where the atmosphere is beginning to get itself set up for just that kind of a storm. Southwestern Oklahoma in particular, there are some clear spots that we're watching, and there's definitely some other atmospheric things going on that are allowing thunderstorms to develop in that region, also across parts of the Texas Panhandle. So we've got to monitor this area very carefully over the next couple of hours. Extremely unstable air is already in place, and we are getting some thunderstorms developing along the edge. This is the warm front, essentially, right in about like that. They develop right along that warm front, get caught up in those circulations, and then move away. So the storms that move north of I-40 into northern Oklahoma, at least for now, the ones that are moving away in that direction, are going to become likely less severe as they do. They are running away from the exceptionally unstable air that's in place in southwestern Oklahoma and areas nearby. It is these storms here, that maybe not mature yet, but will take advantage of this incredibly favorable environment for severe weather in the next, say, hour or even sooner than that. Because the air mass is so unstable, these storms could grow very tall and very strong extremely quickly. And when you not just look at the instability, but when you look at the wind shear and you look at some of the other variables that meteorologists look at for the ability for tornadoes to be produced from thunderstorms, it is on the very high end of this scale, right out in here in southwestern Oklahoma, just north of the Red River. So keep in mind that area is going to be probably growing in size in the next hour or so as well. But keep in mind that these storms right in here are moving into that region and could very quickly become a benign cumulus cloud and a tornadic supercell inside of an hour. That's the kind of change that we have to watch for very carefully. There aren't any warnings with these storms right now. In fact, many of them are not even producing lightning. Perhaps some of them are. I didn't turn on the lightning. Let me do that right now. And just to see if indeed we get some of that from the data. Yes, we do, right out in here. Yes, sir.
Why you're looking at the lightning and why that's important?
Well, the lightning tells us that the storm is a bit more mature. It's got some ice in it. You have stronger updrafts and downdrafts. Certainly a storm without lightning is much less likely, if at all possible, to create a tornado. The ones that are more mature, that get stronger and stronger updrafts, are the ones that have lightning, and we're seeing that right now near the Oklahoma and Texas border. So there are some of that going on right now. This is part of a process that we have to sort of monitor very carefully. I was looking in an area east-southeast of Lubbock, Texas. This storm's struggling a bit, but guys, overall, we are in a really potent environment this afternoon. Tornadoes are likely imminent.
Breaking right now on the Weather Channel, the Storm Prediction Center in Norman, Oklahoma, issuing an additional tornado watch, which is also a PDS, a particularly dangerous situation. This tornado watch does include Norman, Oklahoma, where the Storm Prediction Center is located. It does include Oklahoma City, Wichita Falls, Oklahoma City and Wichita Falls. We do have crews in position there at the Weather Channel to bring you the very latest information from there. What else is on this map that we don't see the actual name for, but Sayre, Oklahoma, where we do have team coverage as well that will continue here in just moments. But to reiterate what's breaking right now, a tornado watch issued for now both parts of Texas and Oklahoma, which does include Oklahoma City, getting up to and around the Tulsa area. And we can see Sayre, Oklahoma there in western Oklahoma. That is where meteorologist Tevin Wooten is reporting for us live there and gathering the very latest information here and bringing us the developments as they happen. So, Tevin, we look at the satellite and we can see what's over your head from outer space. But from the ground there, what are you watching and what are you most interested to see play out over the next several minutes or several hours?
Chris, I'm more interested in two things. The temperature and the dew point right now. We were in Stillwater, Oklahoma earlier today. It was not as warm. Temperatures in the upper 50s, maybe mid 60s at best. The moisture was certainly there, but we had thick cloud coverage. Interesting enough, though, as we drove that 2.5-hour drive here to Sayre, Oklahoma, the moisture's here and the temperatures are here too. We haven't had abundant sunshine, but you can certainly feel the mugginess in the atmosphere. The winds are also picking up, sustained winds between 20 and 25 miles an hour non-stop. Look at the way these clouds are racing from the back side of your screen towards the right side of your screen here. So we're looking at that general southerly flow in the atmosphere that I've been talking about. And that southerly flow is key to transporting in that moisture and those the stickiness in the air that we've been talking about here in Sayre, Oklahoma. Or stickiness. Well, that's the moisture, and you can feel it when you walk outside. It's so thick, you want to cut it with a knife. Well, when you bring that moisture in the lower levels of the atmosphere, quite literally where we are standing and aloft too, and you bring in daytime heating, then that moisture becomes positively buoyant and it wants to rise. And as that rises, guess what else you're doing? You're building thunderstorms, you're building supercells, and ultimately, like we will see today, you're going to build in some tornadoes, and some of those tornadoes will be strong, damaging, violent tornadoes. We're talking EF3, EF4 potential tornadoes, if not higher. So we do have that PDS watcher, that particularly dangerous situation tornado watch that was just issued by the Storm Prediction Center. We are in it, and so are some of our other crews. And so we're going to do our best to show you safely from the ground what we're seeing, what we're experiencing, to better forecast this and to better prepare you at home. But by the way, if you happen to be out, don't think you can just come out and stay out in a day like this. You need to have a plan in place and have it quickly if you don't already have one to get to shelter in safety. Chris?
Always great advice, Tevin. Thank you so much. Also a reminder for people that may be visiting some of these areas that are under a tornado watch, which is a particularly dangerous situation, make sure you know where you are. And I know that may sound a little silly, but what I mean by that is make sure you know the city you're in and the county you're in as well. That way, if your phone does go off and there is a tornado warning for where you are, you'll know that it is relevant in where you are. So know the county you're in and make sure you know that the city and even surrounding cities would be helpful as well. So a big area now under a tornado watch, which means the Storm Prediction Center has highlighted or has recognized some areas that conditions remain favorable for tornadoes, but not just a few tornadoes here and there. The possibility for tornado outbreak. Some of the tornadoes may be long-lived, which means they're in progress on the ground for a long period of time. Greater likelihood they could hit something. And then potentially strong, potentially destructive tornadoes, maybe a lot more potential significant structural damage with some of these tornadoes that are possible today. As we're looking at Oklahoma City, one of the spots, and then over into Texas as well, including Lubbock up to Amarillo, Interstate 27, over to Interstate 40 into Oklahoma and Oklahoma City. Some of the areas included with this PDS, particularly dangerous situation tornado watch that's in effect till 8 o'clock o'clock in these areas. And right now, starting to see hints that the atmosphere is going, seeing some storms here and here. We're going to have exclusive expert analysis coming up on this in just a few moments. But we're certainly seeing atmosphere with winds going at different directions at different levels of the atmosphere. An atmosphere, Chris, that we know is going to want to spin once things get going. And once that air starts rising, it's really going to get going.
And this is where, a shower can become a supercell in a matter of minutes. That's how quickly these storms are going to be developing, but also traveling at highway speeds. That's why they're going to be quick to react when they see a tornado signature. So be heads up for that. So high risk and extreme chance here for not only dangerous long track tornadoes from Oklahoma City over into North Texas, but also damaging winds at potentially over 100 miles per hour and large hail over 2 inches in diameter. So when we talk about high risk, it's just when a severe weather outbreak is expected. This is something we've been watching for nearly a week now, and we're talking high confidence here in long track tornadoes or derechos, which are damaging wind events. The last time we had this type of day was back in 2017. A couple of years ago. Right now, a lot of rain here into Kansas and Oklahoma, but Texas, especially here in the Panhandle, is where we're watching. 10 coverage here on the weather.
A flash flood watch is in effect. Currently in our area, 55 degrees under mostly cloudy skies. Today, rain likely. High 57, winds east-northeast at 15 to 25 miles per hour. Rainfall near 1/4 inch. Tonight, windy with thunderstorms. Low 53. Here's our 7-day outlook.
All right, welcome back into Weather Center Live, folks. I'm meteorologist Tevin Wooten from Sayre, Oklahoma, and we have a tornado outbreak potential on our hands for the day today. So I'll go ahead and issue this caveat. Have a safe shelter to go to. Does not need to be a mobile or manufactured home. It needs to be a sturdy shelter. If you're in anywhere that's in a tornado watch today, we just got a watch that was issued about 15 to 20 minutes ago. That does include the Sayre area north along portions of I-40, southwest of Oklahoma City and to Oklahoma City, and actually closer to Tulsa. That goes until about 8 o'clock today. Again, have a way to get those warnings, folks. I mean, this atmosphere is very potent and just waiting to go off. I was looking at some discussion from the National Weather Service and the Storm Prediction Center. They're estimating CAPE values to be 4,000 to 5,000 joules per kilogram. That's essentially, it's like a powder keg waiting to go off, if you will. You drop one match on that thing and it is off to the races. And just to give you perspective here, average about 1,000 joules per kilogram. That's what you get with a thunderstorm with updrafts right around 100 miles an hour at the strongest portions of that updraft. We can certainly see it exceed that today. I was just checking out the sky earlier. We do have a cumulus cloud starting to build in. That's just one thunderstorm that's about 20 miles away. That cauliflower that you see outside, it looks like a very puffy cloud, if you will. Some of those, they're starting to go off here left and right. We do have a thunderstorm near Elk City and also one towards Shamrock, Texas, just to the north that's pushing through. And we're going to bring in Dr. Greg Postel. Again, this is that expert analysis you can only get here. And Dr. Postel, go in just a little bit deeper if you can. And what does 4,000 to 5,000 joules per kilogram look like on a day-to-day?
It's unusual, and what it means is that the updrafts can accelerate very quickly and lead to some very tall thunderstorms and lead to a lot of big hail, among other things in the environment that they're in today. They're also going to be quite supportive of tornadoes, long track and violent tornadoes, certainly in the cards, which is why we have a tornado watch issued by the Storm Prediction Center. That goes until 10 o'clock tonight, and this is a wording that is not used that often. It's a particularly dangerous situation, meaning that these aren't tornadoes that you more commonly see. These could be the rare high-end tornadoes that accompany some of the more substantial and dangerous thunderstorms that will be likely across many of these areas in Oklahoma, especially later on today. We also have the same kind of tornado watch out for parts of the Texas Panhandle that goes until 8 o'clock. So let's look and see what we've got now on the visible satellite pictures, because, you know, we were watching this stuff here just east-southeast of Lubbock. There was some chatter out there that maybe the storms are struggling because there was some warming aloft trying to inhibit some of the strength of the updraft there. That does not appear to be the case. In fact, this storm appears to be on its way to getting even stronger in the next 15 minutes to a half an hour. This is also in an area that we've got to monitor very carefully. And also, as I mentioned, in Oklahoma, right out in here, the skies, there are enough breaks in the skies, and there are some signs that there are some storms already trying to develop in very unstable air. Now, Tevin was talking about one way to measure that instability is what's called CAPE. Don't worry about it, but it's really a lot. It's really high, exceptionally strong, and you'll have some big thunderstorms. Okay, so let me go through a couple of these right now. I think I can go to, well, one more thing here. When you include CAPE in other values that sort of assess the likelihood of tornadoes or the potential for the atmosphere to support tornadoes, when you include all that, you're on the very high end of the scale here across parts of Oklahoma. This is a tornado parameter that is on the very high end of the scale. That means that thunderstorms in that environment will be very capable of supporting tornadoes. So let's go to the stuff near Lubbock. Okay, this is a strengthening storm. Got a bunch of cloud to ground lightning strikes. We have a severe thunderstorm warning out. That is a storm that is moving northeastward quickly. And then up here across parts of Oklahoma, while we don't have any warnings yet, guys, there may be the warning coming out in the next 15 minutes, say, for example, for some of these storms near Shamrock, Texas, or areas nearby these storms. Because of that incredible instability, Chris, they will potentially go severe very quickly from being just an ordinary cumulus cloud to a raging severe thunderstorm.
And Dr. Postel, going through the next few hours, we're going to see storms develop as clusters or individually by themselves. We talk a little bit about why the ones by themselves can be particularly dangerous.
Well, they're particularly dangerous in the sense that they're more capable of producing tornadoes than storms in lines. Storms in lines can do that, but you often need a delicate balance between a downdraft and an updraft, an outflow and an inflow, to get the right circulation to get a tornado, to get a thunderstorm to produce a tornado. And when they're all by themselves, they're better at doing that than when they're in lines. They can destructively interfere with one another and end up being kind of this downdraft-driven high wind event, which in its own right, Chris, is really dangerous. And I think we got a shot at seeing, unfortunately, that across parts of Oklahoma later on tonight. Chris.
All right, Post, I want to get you caught up right now with what we know. And with the threat of severe weather and knowing this was coming in days in advance, there has been a lot of steps taken out ahead of this. The Storm Prediction Center, now day of, has issued tornado watches, including PDS watches, potentially dangerous situation watches for nearly half of the state of Oklahoma. This is only the second watch in Storm Prediction Center history where every category of watch probabilities, tornadoes, wind, and hail, are above 95%. The watch is in effect until 10 o'clock Eastern, or local time, I should say, Central Time. PDS has also been issued for parts of western Texas and all public schools in Oklahoma City. More Oklahoma closed today. We have team coverage. Stay with us here on the Weather Channel.